Welcome back to another explainer. Okay, today we are exploring literally one of the most incredible non-stop chemical processing plants on the entire planet. And I'm talking about your own body. We're going to look at the human digestive system not just as some basic biological function, but as a highly coordinated, incredibly efficient disassembly line. Okay, let's dive into this. I want you to imagine the very last meal you ate. Maybe it was a sandwich, a big salad, or a bowl of pasta. The second you took that first bite, you actually kicked off a super complex, multi-stage journey that transforms that physical food into the microscopic energy that powers your very existence. But what actually happens in the dark once that food leaves your mouth? To really wrap our heads around this, we need to look at the 5 fundamental steps of nutrition. Think of this as the master timeline for our disassembly line journey. First up, we've got ingestion, just taking the food in. Second is digestion, breaking it down into simple, soluble forms. Third is absorption, where those end products finally cross over into the bloodstream. Fourth is assimilation, where your body actually uses those absorbed nutrients for energy and repair. And finally, egestion, which is the expulsion of whatever couldn't be used. So, here is our literal tour itinerary for today. First, the human disassembly line. Next, mouth-to-stomach breakdown. Then, the nutrient extraction zone. After that, cleanup and waste removal. And finally, protecting your digestive health. All right, Section 1, the human disassembly line. We're mapping out the factory floor. So before we watch the machinery go to work, we need to see the blueprint. The human digestive system is essentially this one long, hollow tube of varying widths called the alimentary canal. It starts at the mouth and goes all the way to the anus. But this tube doesn't work alone. It relies heavily on a group of accessory digestive glands, specifically the salivary glands, the pancreas, and the liver. You can think of these glands as off-site chemical manufacturers. They secrete vital juices and enzymes right into the canal to help break down carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Moving right along to Section 2, mouth-to-stomach breakdown, the grinders and the mixers. Okay, so the very first practical step, ingestion, relies heavily on your mechanical grinders. As an adult, you've got 32 permanent teeth, and they all have highly specialized jobs on this factory line. You've got chisel-like incisors for biting, pointed canines for tearing, and wide, uneven premolars and molars for heavy-duty chewing and grinding. These teeth take that solid sandwich and basically turn it into a soft mass. And at the exact same time, your salivary glands are pumping out saliva to moisten the food, creating what we call a bolus. Now, once you actually swallow that bolus, it doesn't just fall into your stomach because of gravity. That's a huge myth. It gets actively pushed down by a process called peristalsis. This is an absolutely crucial mechanism to understand. Peristalsis is a wave of coordinated muscular contractions and relaxations, and this happens throughout the entire length of the alimentary canal to keep the product steadily moving forward down the line. Let's move to and see how this builds. Basically, the muscular walls of the esophagus contract right behind the food bolus and relax in front of it, physically squeezing it downwards. It travels down this muscular tube, slips behind the windpipe, and lands directly into the acidic stomach, which is this expandable, J-shaped sac on the left side of your abdomen. Once it's there, the stomach muscles aggressively churn the food while mixing it with hydrochloric acid. But here's the thing. Acid and mechanical churning, they just aren't enough on their own. Enter our chemical workforce, enzymes. If the stomach is a churning mixer, enzymes are the highly specialized microscopic chemical catalysts. They're required in really small amounts to dramatically speed up chemical reactions, and they're incredibly specific. Like a protein digesting enzyme will only work on protein. It literally won't do a thing to a carbohydrate. They take these complex, bulky food molecules and snip them down into simple, soluble components that your body can actually absorb. Now, you might be wondering, how do we actually know so much about stomach acids and enzymes? Well, you have to hear about the strange case of Alexis St. Martin. He was a fur trader who suffered an accidental gunshot wound in Michigan. Miraculously, he survived, but the wound healed poorly, leaving a permanent window, like a literal hole straight into his stomach. A U.S. Army doctor named Beaumont seized this bizarre opportunity to observe human digestion in real time. He would literally tie bits of food onto strings and drop them right into St. Martin's stomach. Beaumont observed that beef and chicken became mushy from the stomach juices, but things like raw cabbage and carrots remained totally unchanged. It was a groundbreaking, if, slightly gruesome discovery of how specific stomach digestion really is. All right, Section 3, the nutrient extraction zone. This is the chemical processing plant inside the small intestine. As that soupy fluid, which we now call chyme, moves from the stomach into the highly coiled small intestine, the most complex chemistry actually kicks off. Now, what's really interesting here is how our off-site chemical manufacturers get to work. The first part of the small intestine, the duodenum, receives massive chemical support. You've got the liver, the largest gland in your body, producing a greenish-yellow fluid called bile, which gets stored in the gallbladder. Bile is crucial because it emulsifies fats, essentially breaking large fat globules into tiny droplets. And then you have the pancreas, a leaf-shaped gland just below the stomach. It secretes pancreatic juice packed with enzymes ready to break down proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. To make sense of all this chemistry, let's just track our microscopic workers. Up in the mouth, the salivary glands secrete salivary amylase, which starts turning starches into maltose. Down in the stomach, pepsin takes on proteins, breaking them down into smaller peptones. And in the small intestine, pancreatic lipase takes that fat that the liver's bile just emulsified and breaks it down entirely into fatty acids and glycerol. By the time the food makes its way through the highly coiled small intestine, it has been completely disassembled into glucose, amino acids, and fatty acids. Okay, so the food is totally broken down, but now we actually have to extract it, right? That happens via the villi. The inner walls of the small intestine are absolutely covered in these tiny finger-like projections. They're packed with blood capillaries. The villi vastly increase the surface area of the intestine, ensuring maximum absorption of those broken down nutrients right into the bloodstream. This kicks off the assimilation phase. The blood transports these molecules straight to the liver, which acts as a distribution hub, converting extra glucose into glycogen for storage and sending energy out to all the cells in your body for growth and repair. Moving into Section 4, cleanup and waste removal. Extracting the water and taking out the trash. So what happens to the parts of your meal that simply couldn't be broken down? Well, they pass right into the large intestine. It's wider than the small intestine, sure, but it's actually much shorter in length. It's made up of the cecum, the colon, and the rectum. This is where the final physical stage of the journey takes place. The large intestine acts like a massive sponge, absorbing the remaining 90% of the water from this undigested matter. What's left behind is a massive fiber, dead cells, bacteria, and bile pigments. This is formed into feces, temporarily stored in the rectum, and finally expelled from the body, a process we call egestion. Which brings us to Section 5, protecting your digestive health. Keeping the factory machinery running smoothly. Having this microscopic factory inside you is honestly amazing, but it absolutely requires proper maintenance to avoid breaking down. Because, let's be real, we often accidentally sabotage our own factory line. Indigestion is incredibly common. And why? Well, overeating stretches the stomach capacity, which causes pain. Eating too fast means you swallow way too much air, leading to bloating. Lying down right after eating traps that gulped air and can easily cause acid reflux. Highly spicy foods overstimulate acid secretion, resulting in heartburn. And eating late at night upsets your body's natural clock. All of these habits essentially overload your system's capacity to process chemicals efficiently. So the crucial point is, to counteract all of that, you need healthy maintenance habits. Hydration is key. Drinking 8 to 10 glasses of water daily literally keeps the whole process flowing. You need fibrous fruits and vegetables. Remember, fiber gives the large intestine something to grip onto to move waste out efficiently. Maintaining regular meal times prevents your metabolism from stalling. Getting 8 hours of sleep allows your organs to recover. And daily exercise significantly reduces stress and anxiety, which, by the way, are heavily linked to irritable bowel syndrome and indigestion. It really is a marvel of biology, isn't it? Every single day, without you even having to think about it, your body is running this perfectly orchestrated disassembly line. From the literal crushing force of your molars, to the precise chemical sniping of those enzymes, all the way down to the microscopic absorption through the villi. So knowing that you have trillions of microscopic workers relying on the raw materials you provide, how will you fuel your factory today? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.